Yes. All right. So thank you, Tina. I will talk about the pedagogical aspects of entrepreneurship in education. And I will talk a little bit about something that we call value creation pedagogy, which is part of the research I do. I'm an entrepreneurship teacher, but also my research is about how to make people more entrepreneurial. So value creation pedagogy is a practical way to develop your teaching to engage your students more. So this applies primarily to teachers. I also work with people in working life and to make them more entrepreneurial, but then we use slightly different approaches. Very much in brief, I work at Chalmers, but I also work as an entrepreneur 2 days a week. I am a teacher at Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship, where we teach people to start companies. And that is what my research is also about. And then I also work with some books that I will tell you a little bit about, and also a research tool, which is the topic of my company. I wanted to give you a little bit of a context. Here is a progression model of entrepreneurship in education. So you could, the left part is a broad definition or a broad interpretation of what this is about, which is basically about being or becoming entrepreneurial. And to the right, you have more of where you teach students to become an entrepreneur, where they get to actually start their own company. I would like to start on the left side with this value creation pedagogy part, because I think many of you are not business teachers or business researchers. You are for example, in the area of chemistry, where you might do research, you might do some teaching, and I don't think that the right side here is the most interesting for you. So I will focus on value creation pedagogy here today. This framework is from an article I wrote some years ago. You have the reference down there. But first I would like to show a practical example of value creation pedagogy, and it's actually from Tina's class in chemistry. So let's have a look. It's a 2-minute video. Let me know if you cannot hear the sound.
So the course that I'm teaching, it's called Biological Materials. We have half lectures and half project work in the laboratory.
So we had a project that was on a specific biological material, and the outreach was to contact an external person that would have an interest in this material. And it would also be valuable if this person could also exchange some information, like in our case with spider silk, that we spoke about the spider silk and the structure and the properties, and they could tell us about the spiders and their behavior and how they produce the spider silk. Yeah, they were really interested in our project. They don't know that much about the actual spider silk, more about the animal and its behavior.
I think it's a different take on the teaching pedagogy that you have. So it's more of fostering an environment of intellectual curiosity rather than just learning the theory and taking exams. Yeah.
You don't know anything as good as when you explain it for someone that's never heard it before. If you can convince a person that you have the knowledge about something, you know it for sure. So that's deeper learning in my opinion.
For the students in the projects, the outreach would bring the value that they would actually have to reflect on: is this meaningful what we are doing, or does this relate to anything that's out there? Like, does it really have any value? Was this stupid what we did, or is it? Are we the cutting edge, or are we somehow just a little bit behind it, or are we doing something that was done in the 80s? Can be used to motivate the students, or the students get like motivated by themselves. And I mean, then you have to work less because they work more.
So yeah, with this little introduction, I'll just go through briefly what I will talk about here in my 25 minutes. So first I will tell you something about what I call work-learn balance, something that we all need more of in life. And then I will talk a little bit about this value creation pedagogy. What is it about? I will let you know a bit about the effects we have seen when you work like this together with students. And then some very brief ideas and recommendations on how to do this in practice. So that is the agenda. So let's start. Work-learn balance. So when we have a lot of focus on learning, but not much focus on creating value for others, we are in the education system. When we have a lot of focus on creating value for others, but not so much focusing on our own learning, we are in the working life. When we have a good balance between our own learning and creating value for others, customers, whoever it could be, I prefer to say that we are being entrepreneurial. And it's a broad interpretation of entrepreneurship, you could say, that applies to everyone and anyone in society. So it's a better work-learn balance, basically. Based on these observations, we have articulated the work-learn balance theory. And fundamentally, this is all about the good things that happen to people who have good work-learn balance. On an individual level, we have studied deeply meaningful experiences that motivate and engage people to the fullest, students as well as employees. And on an organizational level, we have studied organizations obtaining higher quality, efficiency, and ultimately better solutions for their customers in the private sector, for citizens in the public sector, and for students in the education sector. But situations of good work-learn balance are rare exceptions, and the most common situation is actually imbalance. And the main reason for imbalance in the education system is that it is deemed unacademic to combine learning with value creation, or work as it's often called. The main reason for imbalance in working life is that customers are seldom willing to pay for employee training, employee learning. So organizations that are maximizing profits, they are at the same time often also minimizing costly employee learning. I will now present 2 ways to achieve a better work-life balance, one for working life and one for education. Let's start with working life. In working life, we can strive for entrepreneurial employees who try to create new kinds of value for others, and who do this through a structured learning process that we might even label scientific. I've written a book about how this can be done for teachers. It's called The Scientific Teacher. Unfortunately, for most of you, it's in Swedish, but I do have a translation on my blog of many of the chapters. In education, we can work with something we have labeled value creation pedagogy, which I will soon talk more about in detail. I've written a book also about this way of achieving a good work-life balance, and that is called The Value Creating Student. And this is also in Swedish, but I've started translating it into English. You can find that on my blog, vcplist.com. Most chapters are actually available in English. There is also a Spanish translation, because this has become an idea that is spreading around the world in pedagogical areas. So, what is value creation pedagogy? Well, this is fundamentally about letting students learn through creating value for others, here and now. So let's look more closely at how this is defined. And this is a longer version. Let students learn by applying their knowledge and skills to try to create something of value to at least one external stakeholder outside their group, class, or school. So the video that I showed you initially was an example of exactly this, where TINA students were asked to do this with people based on their knowledge in spider silk. Learning knowledge and skills is, of course, the goal of education, but value creation for others is the means that enhances learning. It is a creative exercise. Students create something, physical or intellectual, that is to be appreciated by an external person who then gives feedback. It is the attempt that counts, not the potential value that might be created. The one they are trying to create value for needs to be able to give feedback on how it was perceived. So this means that not only people can be recipients of value, animals and indeed plants can also provide feedback. A plant will become green if you take good care of it. Built into this definition, we also find a progression model. Students can start by creating value for someone outside their own group, but within their own class. Then they can go ahead and create value outside class, but within the safe walls of the university or the school. In the last step, they take the step out in society and then also enjoy the strongest effects on learning, motivation, and engagement. And this is what we saw in Tina's example. These students created value for people outside of Chalmers. But what does the word value mean? Well, here is a model for what value can mean. The model shows 5 different types of value that can be created for oneself and for others. This gives us a total of 10 different perspectives on value. People can create enjoyment value, social value, harmony value, influence value, or economic value, both for themselves and for others. Here are some examples of value creation pedagogy in practice, because we have studied this on all levels of education. Children in preschool have helped architects design a new building. Students in a primary school have lobbied in national media to save their favorite TV program from being cancelled. Students in a primary school have taught elderly how to use iPads. Students in a primary school in Turkey have used waste materials to craft toys for orphan children. Students in a lower secondary school have arranged sport activities for refugees, and students in an upper secondary school have written music to texts written by younger students. And then coming to the university level, we have music students who have developed their own value pitch based on their knowledge in instruments. We have university students in architecture who have worked with real missions in society. And then Tina's students, where they educated people in working life on biomaterials. But what is the pattern here? Well, I think that value creation pedagogy illustrates a paradox, an altruistic paradox. It seems that we humans are more motivated by creating value for others in 10 minutes than by creating value for ourselves in 5 to 10 years. And if that is the case, it might be better to ask students, for whom is this knowledge valuable today, than to say to them, you will have use for this knowledge in the future. In my book about this, I write about a lot of different examples of value creation pedagogy. And I won't go through them here, but there are so many different ways to work in this way as an integrated part of education. Tina's example would maybe be on the left, on the right side here, students as chemists or something, where they do something professional, but they still remain in school or in the classroom, or at least when they prepare and then when they come back to report. So how can a teacher know if an activity is in line with what we here label value creation pedagogy? Here are 2 questions that any teacher can ask herself. If the answer to both questions is yes, then it's a case of value creation pedagogy. The first question: are my students expected to interact with someone outside their own group, teacher, class, or school, or university, even if it can be scary? And then question 2: are my students expected to try to create something of value for someone outside their own group, teacher, class, or school, or university? These are 2 simple questions. And they can also be transformed into recommendations for teachers who want to work with value creation pedagogy in their own teaching. As a teacher, you don't need to change your entire pedagogical approach. You just add a drop of interaction with the outside world for your students, and a drop or two of letting your students create value for external people. No need to mix even. The new color will spread throughout everything you do in the course or classroom. And if you work like this from time to time, over and over, a new culture will establish together with your students. For every new assignment, your students will ask themselves, and also you as a teacher, for whom can we do this? So let's talk effects. What happens when you work in this way? Well, there are 4 difficult and important challenges that all teachers face, depending on age, of course, but they are pretty general, and where value creation pedagogy can help. First, value creation pedagogy gives us more motivated students who feel more meaning in their education, and therefore they work harder and then they learn more. This is what Tina also talked about. It also makes it easier for teachers to achieve pedagogical variation. And then that is a way to reach more of your students, or even all of them, in a better way, because we learn differently. It can also give a much better social climate in class, which maybe this is not a big problem at university, that you have conflicts. Well, actually, I manage conflicts among our students quite often. But especially when they are younger, this is a pretty tough challenge. And this way of working has shown to lead to less conflict in class, which makes students collaborate better together, and then they also learn more. And then finally, value creation pedagogy also leads to developing students' entrepreneurial competencies. And this makes them succeed better in working life and actually in life as a whole. And these competencies are not only for starting a company and being an entrepreneur, they are very broadly applicable in whatever you do in life. And that's actually, there's a model that the European Commission has done on what entrepreneurial competencies are, which you can see here. And this is, I mean, Jaco uses these competencies all the time, but he's not the only one. It's not only the lead entrepreneur who is using these competencies. Taking initiative, mobilizing others, being motivated, working with a vision, spotting opportunities, coping with uncertainty and risk. These are things that everyone needs in the working life. And how do you then develop these competencies? Well, what we have seen in our research, and this is back to the same research article that I started out with here, it is the emotional events that trigger developed competencies. So when students get to interact with people in the outside world, they develop their self-efficacy, they develop their initiative ability, they develop their marketing skills. When they get to create value for others, they develop their passion and motivation. They also develop their knowledge about subject matter, and they might even develop their identity, that they want to be more like a person who creates value for others. When they get to work in teams, they develop their self-insight because they compare themselves to others. And yeah, so these are a couple of the effects that we see from this way of teaching and learning. This is a really powerful way to work. So to finish off, just some quick advice on value creation pedagogy for teachers. As I a little bit said before, don't transform your teaching. It's about tweaking it. How can I add a grain of interaction with external people by doing minor tweaks to my existing student assignments? And then the second question, how can the energy that my students already spend in school create some value for external people by me as a teacher doing minor tweaks to my existing student assignments? And then this leads to this culture of students always asking you, for whom are we doing this? Then you can also take inspiration from a playbook that the European Commission has done. I have a colleague of mine who was part of this work at Chalmers. His name is Yashar Mansouri. I mean, Chalmers is is strong on entrepreneurial competencies in general. So we have a lot of people working with this internationally. So entrepreneurial learning beyond the classroom, what are the principles, what are the methods, what are the tools and techniques that you can use? And I mean, this is a very practical book, so pick it up. It's available for free online. You just search for the title and you will find it. You can also let the students do the job for you by asking them a number of different questions. The first question is something that I often recommend teachers to start with. To ask your students, for whom could this knowledge be valuable today? You can also use principles from a theory that is called effectuation, which basically goes like this. What effects can we create with who we are, what we care for, what we have, what we know, and who we know? We can also use something that is called appreciative inquiry, where we ask ourselves what really works well and how we can get more of that. We can work with design thinking principles. How can we know what people need? Let's go out and ask them. We can also work on something called lean principles. How can we know what is valuable? Let's make a test. Let's make a prototype. We also have developed a spider diagram in our research on this for teachers to use, where they get to evaluate their own teaching in 8 different dimensions. To what extent do my students get to take ownership over the learning process and resources? To what extent do they get to work in teams? To what extent do they get to create value for others? To what extent do they learn from feedback? Do they get to work iteratively? Do they get to expand their knowledge? Can they interact with people? Are they invited to manage uncertainty and change? 8 simple questions that then can help teachers to think through their teaching in different ways. You can also use United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and make them the starting point of a value creation process. So the teacher can ask basically, how can we use our collective knowledge and skills to act upon goal number 1, number 8, number 12, number 17, etc. And this also invites students to think through the knowledge. And then finally, we have a form for pedagogical planning, which is part of the book that I wrote about this, The Value Creating Student. You can download it on my blog, vcplist.com/resources, where teachers get to think through their teaching and how they can revise it so that it becomes more in line with these principles of value creation pedagogy. Yeah, that was what I was going to talk about. And let's see if we can have a discussion and some questions.